So today we're here at PondsFountainsVideo30 near Apeldoorn, and we're going to do a 2-day workshop. It's called Ponds and Fountains, but it's actually water management of larger areas in history and hopefully also into the future. From all different nationalities and all different countries, we want to learn more or less like how did they manage water in past times and what can we learn from it. I try to introduce the workshop members on, okay, where are we? What's the history of this place? And also what's the geomorphology of the area?
His wife, Mary II, Stuart. So they built PondsFountainsVideo30. They were looking for a place to have a hunting palace, but we also tried to have a palace with a nice garden to go with it.
We stated this place is exactly here because of all the fresh water that's there already in the 17th century. And I try to show them how the glacier period shaped the landscape in such a way that the water is here.
You can find the history of the Ice Age on the outside of those stones. So, well, this is a nice example.
And now afterwards we will go walking and biking and try to show everybody how you can read the landscape, how you can recognize where all your different water sources are. And if you have hills, perhaps you could even tap into some of those hidden water sources. What's very unique on PondsFountainsVideo30 is, of course, its pristine shape, its historical value, more or less. It's really looking like a formal garden out of the 17th century. It's completely reconstructed in the way we think it really looked in the 17th century. And this area is very special because not the last glacier time, but the one before, 200,000 years back, the ice came until exactly this position. So the landscape is formed by glaciers, by the ice, and that's actually why there is so much fresh running water in the area. And that combined with the fact that here it's also the wettest part of the Netherlands, the highest annual rainfall, also makes that we have an almost constant supply of water. Today we mainly focus how they did so in history and show them different historical layers, 16th century, 17th century and even later on. But then in the afternoon we will show them okay, and how can you use that historical knowledge to try to improve retaining capacities of your area in present time.
Het low doesn't mean low, it's an open spot in the woods, but it was also a low place where it was relatively easy to bring natural water to the gardens and to allow water features, fountains and springs to work. And that was the main aim and the main reason for Het Loo to be built where it is now. We talk about 1684, when this started. The place itself is much older. There is a medieval castle that was bought by William and Mary and it dates back to 1439. But that was more or less a hunting lodge and a working castle with mills and so on, and not with great gardens. Today's purpose is also to show where the water came from. So after our visit to the formal gardens, we went outside into the park and saw those breathtaking and enormous lakes. They were remodeled in the 19th century, but originally there were 6 fish ponds. You must imagine such an estate as Het Loo is with a lot of people living there. Everything that you needed at such an estate had to be produced at the estate itself, so fish ponds were part of it. We saw some water elements in the park and a lot of small kennels. And those small kennels partly were there to feed water mills, and later on they were used for the water features in the garden. And they were even extended by William and Mary in the late 17th century to bring much more water to the gardens. Nowadays we do not use those old cisterns anymore. We are not allowed to take too much water from the natural sources. So we built an enormous water cellar and the water is pumped up from 25 meters deep. And then it comes into a cleaning system and then it goes into the fountains and ponds in the garden. And this water is also used to water the garden if necessary. And when it comes back after being used, there might be some pollutions in the water and it is cleaned. The iron is taken out and it is reused again and again and again. And so we are not using too much water. The old system provided the water, it came into the garden and it floated away into the River IJssel, so you could only use it one time. But the modern system is different and it's reused, and I think that's important. Well, in the afternoon we will head for the original sources of the fountains. Yeah, really hidden in the woodlands and in the natural areas here of the Crown domain, nearly 12,000 hectares. And well, we will do this by bike.
I'm Fiona Parrott. I'm a senior gardener for the National Trust and I've worked in various historic gardens in Sussex. These workshops have offered a way to understand the history and the craft skills for gardening in a historic garden, and for me it's been particularly interesting because I've learned from other people outside of the National Trust who are also working on historic garden conservation, and so it's been fascinating to see different approaches, meet different people and really learn from the European networks which aren't necessarily so available every day. So this workshop on ponds and fountains in historic gardens has been really useful in that the garden I'm currently working in has got multiple lakes and cascades. Those need to be managed, and how we think about those and understand them in their historic context might be a different era, but the same processes and methods and careful consideration need to be put into the maintenance of them and preservation of them for the future. I think being a part of the workshop today and hearing from Willem and Renske meant that I looked at the ponds and cascades and the different fountains and the pieces and parts that go into those, both the historic and the contemporary management, in totally different eyes. I have been to Paleis-Hetlo before, but this was just like suddenly looking at the water features in a completely novel way. It's been like putting on new water feature glasses. That was a terrible thing to say, but yeah, it really was like seeing them through new eyes, yeah, with the way they've been discussed today.
I'm Jan Hørbo. I come from Oslo, Norway, and I am a gardener. I'm head gardener of the Norwegian Folkemuseum, which is an outdoor museum right outside Oslo. I believe I've come to all of the workshops, yeah. Well, I gained a lot of different knowledge, I would say, of the topics, of course, which have expanded the way my knowledge of historical gardens on these topics we've been talking about and learning about. But of course, then again, I also learned a lot more because I met interesting people. The essence of today was the ability to learn more about the physical reality behind a fascinating or fabulous fountain. Because you see this wonderful fountain, and to see what actually lies behind of practical arrangements to achieve that was very interesting.
And we're here at Roosendaal Castle, just in the Netherlands, the eastern part. We had a very informative, very interesting morning with a group. We talked about what the reason was that Castle Roosendaal building just here. We talk about the water future, the maintenance, the historical information. We just started it's called the bedriegertjes, the cheaters, and there were very small nozzles in the ground, and also how that element is worked without a pump. We looked to the river gods, and there's a big amount of water is going over it, and it's good to take a tour and just look at the specific element and see how we did it at Roosendaal. of the Baroque period, 300 years ago. Some years ago they did a big restoration. There was in the 1980s a big restoration of the whole park, specific the shell gallery behind me. The shell gallery is building up with nature, stone, coral, shells. But there was a problem. They're building up with coral and shells, and they're not allowed to use that or to buy it in. But the border control in the Netherlands, they take a big amount of these shells from someone, and they could give it to us. And for that reason, we could restore the shell gallery.
Hi, I'm Jonathan. I am a head gardener in the historic landscape. I am currently the head gardener at Tame Park, and I have been there for 5 years. This is the first workshop I've been to, and it's been really good. Really much enjoyed it. I think one of the key things to take away from the workshop is how invested everybody is here in researching the past for the benefit of the future. Not really to restore the past, but to benefit the future. How we take historic states forward using the principles and practices of the past. The most memorable thing from the last 2 days is meeting people, I think, and it's realising that we're all in the same boat. We all face the same issues, whether that's box blight, box caterpillar, overflowing ditches that need to be cleared. It doesn't matter whether you're in the Netherlands or the UK or in Sweden, we all face the same things, and the more we talk about them, the better equipped we'll be to deal with the future.
So I'm Claudia Feldhaus, I'm from Cologne, from Germany, and I'm a garden planner and art historian. And I plan gardens and write park maintenance documentations and documentations about historical gardens. I have visited 5 workshops. I have learned a lot of these workshops, practical things. For example, the soil workshop, which had to do with garden archaeology, because it was quite new for me. Or I heard something about charcoal. I haven't heard it before. And I enjoyed it very much to be together with people from several countries and to put my eyes over the edge of the plate and to get to know what other countries have solutions, what the solutions are. And it was very, very interesting for me.
My name is Lina Hirsch. I'm the head gardener of Slottsträdgården in Malmö, meaning the castle gardens, and I work for the municipality of Malmö in Sweden. My garden is a modern garden, but my closest colleagues work at gardens that are historic, like the castle of Torup, which has medieval ancestry, and Katrinetorp Landeri, which is a summer residence from the 19th century. So this is knowledge that I can share with my colleagues, and it can also inspire the ponds and fountains I have today. I think the highlight for me is both to see these beautiful gardens, and another very important part for me is the networking, to meet with colleagues, to discuss different issues, and to share knowledge. That's something that really inspires me. I think it's very important to have networks where you can come together, you learn from each other, and you can share the best practices. And even though I work in a quite modern garden, I think to know the handicraft and to use the handicraft and keep it alive, it's very inspiring and it's very important, because this is our green heritage, and I think it's important that we keep it alive.